What we can expect soon is decision makers will become built from AI. Will a seller job become training an AI first to make sure that it could make a case for a company to another AI? Maybe, because we will live in a half a digital world, right? And the creation of all of the documents and the collaboration with the AI will be elevated to a completely different level.
Are we going to have these AI wars between AI buyers and sellers going back and forth at some point?
It could be, right? It might be.
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Ocean, founder and CEO at Sales Enablement. And today I'm absolutely honored to have Alexander Matyushenko. I believe it's important to mention a little bit about Alex's background for context. So, Alex has started at Microsoft, where he led global sales enablement for Office Cloud and trained over 12,000 people annually. Then he moved to AWS to head up sales productivity and enable for the Americas, supporting their goal to grow from $30 billion to $100 billion. Now he leads sales enablement and productivity at Google Cloud, where he continues supporting thousands of Googlers in their enablement journey. So today, the topic is really interesting because I believe it should be top of mind for all of our revenue leaders out there. And it's about the way AI is revolutionizing the way we work. But rather than just talk about theory, we are fortunate to have Alex to get some real insights from someone who's actually in front line of this transformation. Alex, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much for the intro, Michael. Really delighted to be here. Very important to mention is that on my journey, I wasn't alone, right? There's always people that help you to get through the missions, the tasks, the goals, the OKRs, as we call them, to be successful. So I want to really thank everybody who's probably watching this, right, at some point that helped me to get where I am, and all of those who I'm helping to become confident and successful and productive on their jobs. Glad to be here.
That's amazing. That's the quality of a real leader that gives credit to to the team. All right, Alex, I want to start this conversation by mentioning about your recent article on AI. I found it really fascinating, and most of my questions are actually built around that article because I think it can really help our leaders and also sellers just to understand what's going on, what the future of work might look like moving forward. Part of your article, you mentioned something about Henry Ford. You said, look, when Henry Ford was changing the world back in 1913, and it's kind of like similar to AI revolution today. And that revolution at that time, both sparked fear about job displacement as AI is doing today, right? Based on your experience leading large teams through tech transformations, what are the most effective ways you find to address these fears with your team?
Yeah, first of all, it's worth mentioning that since the Henry Ford's innovation in the manufacturing, we've been through several technical revolutions already, right? And we haven't finished with the previous one, which is cloud. And we are now embarking on the artificial intelligence transformation. Whether it's evolution or revolution, it's up to people to decide. But even if you think about it just for a second, one of my former colleagues gave a very good example about the cloud, but I think it's applicable to AI. At the beginning of the 20th century, when the electricity came to fruition, right? Can you imagine it was just like a century ago? So everybody wanted to have it in every house at some point when they overcome the hesitation. But if you think about New York and other large cities, in every skyscraper or large building, you had a generator who was providing you the electricity, the power, right? Whether you are using something from one provider or another, it's a different story. But then these large grid companies came, right, and say, hey, you don't need to pay for the services or the machine itself, or you don't need to keep the people who are doing all of the maintenance of your generators. You can just buy electricity from us because we have a huge plant over there that will produce it. And everybody was like, no, how could I? I need to have my own generator, right? Like I cannot depend on you. Look at us today. How many of us do have generator at home? Yes, granted, for backup purposes, like large malls or even the houses, I do have a generator, right? Because I live in the forest, makes sense. But 99.9% of time, if we remove the sustainability aside with the solar panels, we're connected to the grid, right? And it takes time for people to process that it's cheaper, more innovative, easier to deal with, more constant. But in order to get to the trade, they had to remove their generators or move it to the backup station, put the cables in, and learn how to deal with it and teach their people how to deal with it. Now, did all of those people who maintain the generators in the big buildings got fired, lost their jobs, and so on? Probably not. They went to the big grid companies, right? Learn more and become more successful there. So this is the like wave after wave that we are going through, and the time is shrinking, right? If from one industrial revolution to another, sometimes it took like in the past like half a century. Now, cloud was invented what, 25, 30 years ago? AI started like ramping up about 10 to 15 years ago. So it's just the 15 years between one innovation or another that is changing our lives dramatically. So I think the key is to keep the learning mindset. You ask the question how I help other people or large companies when we talk about it. You shouldn't think about people as a resource. You should think about people as a curious individuals who could be repurposed, who could learn new stuff. If you have a high performing individual who drives, I don't know, sales of your generators today, the same individual could sell the grid tomorrow. You just need to
Hmm.
have this individual enable him or her to be successful. But nurturing mindset is hard, right? If the individual is not curious to learn, doesn't have the behavior of always enabling himself or herself, that's where the problem is, right? So my advice would be focus on nurturing this always learning mindset, and that will help you and the people that you're responsible for to process the change, learn about new technology or what have you, and just be more successful tomorrow.
I appreciate you sharing, and it makes a lot of sense. And to your point, cloud was invented what 30 years ago, and a couple of years after, I would say like what less than 2 decades. AI is getting more attention than anything else. But past year, because it's been publicly available and people started actually playing around with ChatGPT and other providers out there, I think the change is that it's really accessible today. Not that electricity wasn't accessible, but I think the modern society is just more aligned with using technology than before. And this fear, to your point, is something natural. As human beings, we are always like have a little bit of resistance or maybe a lot towards change. But as leaders, our job is to help nurture this change and help people understand that this is for good, not to get them replaced.
It's a very good point. A good friend of mine, Cameron Tanner, who is a great enablement professional, once said, "A fool with a tool is still a fool," right? Even if you're given the most advanced tool in the world, somebody who doesn't know how to use it, so what? Right? So our job as enablers and leaders, to your point, is to make sure that people actually know when and how to apply a certain tool, and when instead of that take old school dashboard or whiteboard and just start analyzing the data or start writing things down to go through it. Because artificial intelligence in the way of generative AI, where we most of the time using it today, is great at certain things, but the creativity still comes from the people. You should build a certain prompts and teach the LLM to ensure that it does what you are expecting it to do. Because if you don't have an idea what the expectations are, it will not produce the results that you're going to
Mhm.
get. And people argue that, hey, the AI will replace us when we need to do our jobs. Well, yes, if you're just doing the routine tasks, that could be replaced by AI. But if you
Mhm.
make yourself curious, if you learn more about how to deal with that tool, how to leverage it to your advantage, to spend less time on mundane tasks, more time on the strategic tasks, more time on learning, more time on coaching others, more time on working with your customers instead of writing the prospecting emails.
Mhm.
That is where the power of AI is coming. And the productivity is ramping because one way of measuring the productivity is how much time you're actually spending with your customers, right? Forget about the
Hmm.
pipeline revenue and all of those like lagging indicators. Think about just simply how much time you spend with your customers. Taking
Hmm.
into account all the internal meetings and emails that you need to write and the campaigns that you need to update, it might take you too much time from the direct interaction with your customer. And when you're losing this opportunity to connect with your customers directly, you're losing your customers. So that tool can definitely help you with this challenge, but you need to learn how. And instead of being afraid, just keep on taking advantage of it. Just going back for a second to the automotive examples, because I'm a petrol head, you know it. Back then, Ford, it took them quite a bit of hours to produce a car, right, and launch it from the factory. Today, I just watched the documentary recently. Volkswagen automated factory they produce a new car every 6.5 seconds.
Wow,
And that's
that's
thanks
crazy.
to automation, AI, new technology, cloud, grid, and all the other type of innovations that they paid attention to, revamped and changed the approach of how they're doing the things, constantly reevaluating the status quo instead of being afraid of the new technology.
It's a very interesting example. I definitely want to check that documentary myself. 6.5 seconds to build a car. It's just insane.
Well, it's
But
not to build a car, it's to launch, right? Like every 6.5 seconds, a car is exiting the factory, a new car, right? Like the process is a bit longer, but just due to the fact that they produce multiple cars at the same time and the different lines, and it's all
mm,
automated, it just goes that fast that they are able to produce it so quickly. So yeah.
even if you think about it, even if it takes 6 days, it's still very, very fascinating compared to old days. And this reminds me of another point you mentioned on the article about CIOs at data centers, that they had this concern. So what should I do with my people? Like the same thing is happening in the and we see again there are a lot of companies out there pushing AI SDRs, or AI coach that replace all coaches out there. Early cloud adoption, this was a big concern, right, for many of these CIOs. And now we are seeing the similar patterns. Can you walk us through your practical framework for helping employees transition into new roles during these major transformations, if you will?
Yeah, totally. When that started happening, I was still with Microsoft and helping with the executive briefing center program. And that gave me opportunity to connect with a lot of decision makers and the CIOs of the world. To your point, that was a very first question that everybody was asking. Okay, if I move into the cloud, what do I have to do with people? And I was a little bit surprised by this question, taking into account my profession, because my job is to make other people successful and ensure that they have the right behaviors, they have the right skill set, and they have the right knowledge. And to me, answer was obvious: teach them, do something else. The problem that every leader is facing with, besides P&L, right, and the profitability of the company, is they never have enough good people. They never have enough skilled people that know culture, specificity of work, processes, products, and can do things that need to be done. Now, let's imagine that you're not a very big corporation with, let's say, 100 people who are maintaining the data centers. You committed to migration to the cloud. You freed up 100 professionals who know your infrastructure inside out, the company, the culture, majority of them probably high performing individuals. The answer is obvious: teach them cloud, or teach them innovation, or some new technologies that are coming into fruition. They will thank you for that. Because what I learned through these years of transformation is those CIOs or CTOs who invested in their people and said, okay, instead of data specialist, you will be data migration specialist to the cloud. Go take certification from one cloud provider or another, or all three major cloud providers. We will pay for your education, but then come back and help us with the servicing and maintaining this cloud. The employees were
Mm.
super happy because they became immediately relevant to the market. Thanks to their employer who helped them to ramp the knowledge, get certified, Of course, it requires some additional time and investment, but at the end of the day, they are not only helping the company to succeed, but they also becoming more relevant on the market. Now they know cloud. Now any company that would decide to the cloud would gladly have them because they already have this certification. And I'm, for instance, would be very grateful to my employer who thought instead of just cutting me from the P&L perspective as a loss,
Hmm.
rather investing in me, knowing all of the skills that I already have, helping me to ramp and making me more relevant. So that's the pattern that I saw. And some companies that decide the other way. They're like, okay, we can cut some of the spend that we have on people. And from the short-term perspective, it might be efficient, right? They from the P&L perspective, they show the market and the Wall Street that they are more profitable, they are doing better. But the long-term perspective, they will still have to hire people to maintain the cloud and service the cloud and do the data migration and do the update and work with the customers. So they will maybe a year later or 2 years later went back to the market and sometimes will have to talk and hire the same people who they fired, who now
Hmm.
have the required certification and knowledge and skills and behavior, but they will have to pay them 2x, 3x of what they used to pay. So my
Hmm.
advice there would be think long term instead of the short term, because short term decisions are easy. Long term decisions are hard. Commitment is something that is really tough for a lot of leaders. But the long term, that's one of the things that differentiate a good leader from the short sighted leader.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only, revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. I always use this example, although, again, those days, I'm not sure you can really compare it with today with AI, but I look at Salesforce. So when Salesforce was introducing cloud-based CRM, so many sales orgs, they're like, okay, my people are using a spreadsheet. And so many people might thought, some of the leaders, or maybe because they were not tech-enabled themselves, or it was a new thing, said, okay, let's get rid of all these people. And later they had to pay X to get these Salesforce consultants to do some patchwork. And then the talent they fired, they're like, why would I even work for you? I have the skill sets. I go elsewhere and I'm getting paid. And then you have shortage of actually skilled talent to maintain all these systems for you. So the new problem will, start to show inside your organization because you're not, as a leader, willing to adapt to new change, which is not only technology, part is actually your human talent as well. So are
Mhm.
you going to invest in upskilling them or getting rid of them? The decision, I think, is is yours. I have another question about Henry Ford's case. You mentioned in the article Ford still needed qualified people to maintain and repair the assembly line, despite all the automation they already, embedded to their system. What are the new types of roles and skills you're seeing emerge as AI become more, prevalent in sales organizations?
It's a very good question. I think AI is a bit young from that perspective right now to define whether or not the new roles that are emerging are here to stay.
Hmm.
And let me explain you why. There are, of course, like AI migration specialists, people who train LLM models, people who create them, people who understand the different types of models and systems, right? Because there are the different companies and vendors that offer their methodologies from the artificial intelligence perspective. But also, you mentioned the applicability of AI today. It's definitely there, and everybody can go and open the Gemini from Google or ChatGPT or any other system and just start prompting and working with that, right? It doesn't require too much of the skill. Where we do see a lot of skill is people who are educating these models, who are creating them. Outside of high tech market, there is in so many different industries where the scenarios of application might be extremely different from what we see today. I think about the healthcare, right? We have a doctors today that we want to talk to, but before that, we still have outdated systems that you are using when you're calling, right? Like you're calling saying, okay, I need a doctor for this. My son got sick. Here are the symptoms, and they're trying to find out, the right time slot for you to connect with a professional. Think about for a second if it is a good AI engine behind that is trained by professional doctors that can talk to you through the initial symptoms, and if it doesn't fall into a certain category, then connect you with a professional. Similar to the telehealth today, but today we're connected with the real professionals, right? But AI already can do a lot of that stuff because 99%, unfortunately, it's Tylenol or ibuprofen and just rest for 3 days, right? Sometimes cases are slightly different. So we need those doctors who will be able to train the LLM model. And it will take a while to educate them what the hell does it mean to create a prompt.
Hmm.
Right? So this it's partially connected to the enablement as well, because we need those people who can enable anybody in the world to work with artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence will continue evolving. A company like yours, right, that are thinking about, okay, how can we make sure that others are successful at connecting with the people, right, or practicing through the practice with AI. But I think there is a step forward. What we can expect soon is that decision makers will become built from AI. If today to get to the CXO level, for instance, right, you very often need to work through the chain of command, right? You need to connect with the right person at the company, then make your case and ensure that your case is building all the way to the top so you can get to the final decision maker and sign the deal. However, I would expect that in the future, even without connecting with the real human being, the first line of defense will be AI. You will have to
Hmm.
convince AI as a human being that your case is relevant for the company before you actually will be connected to the human being. And that's another kind of interesting pivot towards where we are going. I might be wrong. Like if you ask me what's the evolution from the monetization perspective of AI, that's what I see, and we better be ready for that type of conversations happening. I hope I answer your question.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And this is a big topic maybe for another pod, but I love to have a follow-up question on AI buyers and AI sellers, because you open up and say, look, this buying process, we all know it. If you sell enterprise, you have to walk through the process, and sometimes it's lengthy, and it's not only painful for the seller, it's more painful even for the buyer because it's complicated. Everybody needs to get involved. It takes forever. So that's the cost itself, wasting so much time going through all these validation processes. And if it could be actually completely transformed to an AI based, let's say, buyer solution that can take care of this, that would be a huge time saver. Like the very basic impact of it, I would say, is just time. You save a lot of time. But what are your thoughts on this? Like, this is not necessarily just about this topic, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts since you brought it up. Are we going to have this like AI wars between AI buyers and sellers going back and forth at some point?
It could be, right? It might be. If you think about the hiring process today, that's already happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
People
Yep.
who like big companies already have AI engines checking the resume, people profiles, right, the cover letters, whatever your candidate is submitting, if he or she wants to be employed by the company. But the candidates are becoming smarter, right? They're using the AI systems to create their resumes or refresh them or create the cover letters and submit it to the AI system to check it whether or not it's working. Yeah, you still have a middle person to train the system to create it. But on the both sides, already it's AI talking to AI. So answering your question, I think so. To what degree? Very good question. Because at the end of the day, will a seller job become training an AI first to make sure that it could make a case for a company to another AI? Maybe. We don't know. But back to my very first point, we need to be curious enough and learn about the possibilities and the capabilities of the tools to not be a fool with the tool, to make sure that we actually know what are the applicable
Hmm.
scenarios and how can we empower us, our employees, our leaders, our companies to be successful in this world. Because if we imagine for a second that Elon Musk, right, and his company will be successful with the creation of the chip that connects the digital infrastructure to our human bodies, the entire paradigm of generative AI will shift drastically right away, because we will live in a half a digital world, right? And the creation of all of the documents and the collaboration with the AI will be elevated to a completely different level. Just the memorization of like new data and information for us will be very different. We probably will not even need reading or writing if that type of revolution happens. So sky is the limit. But my point, the most important point that I had tried to make it in that article, it's not about type of revolution or evolution from the industrialization or changes perspective. It's about behavioral transformation for us as a human being. We must be curious. We must be willing to learn new information, new stuff, because as soon as we stop, we are stagnating and become irrelevant for employee, for even our friends. It's sometimes not interesting to talk to you if you don't have new information. We chatted yesterday. I already know everything about you. Why should I talk to you today if you are not able to bring me something new, right? And the doors are closing at some point. So if there is one thing for people to remember, that's the thing.
If that happens, to your point, everything will change. It reminds me of like crazy movies we used to watch when, when we were kids. But we recently actually did a test, to your point, and you still really and genuinely need people who understand AI. So we are an AI company. We build things for revenue organizations. And a recent client asked for Greek language. So surface level, view of this is all right. So all the languages are available. Let's roll out the program in a day, and we are good to go. But what we did was we were basically using another AI, practicing with our AI, and see how they interact to see if it actually makes sense. And then you find patterns, and then you need real professionals who understand how to write these prompts and also understand whether like the context itself makes sense or is just a surface level information about certain languages. Because just having that, let's say, option to roll out all the languages available won't cut it. They might sound not natural. The way we speak, even our own language, is completely different. So I think, to your point, it's just enabling people to understand that change is something that you cannot stop and you have to keep evolving. And I think that's how we survive as human beings, anyways. Like going back to many, many years ago, I think it's always been the pattern. Um, I have a question about like how to actually do this. Like, yes, education is important, but to your point, some of our employees are, more curious in nature, and they're high performing individuals. They want to learn. They don't even need to get permission. They go out there, play around with things, come up with questions. They're good to go. But many show resistance, and that's the reality. As leaders, where should we start when we say education? So, what's the first step when we faced with this resistance, and especially if it's a larger organization?
Yeah, good question. I think it should come from a culture, right? The culture of a company should motivate to learn, and find new technologies and something that you're really curious about. So it should be in the DNA of our organization, whether you call it company values, company leadership principles, company mission. It should be one of those that are helping to guide people and say, hey, if you're joining us, we expect you to be naturally curious and ready to learn as we go, because this company or this industry or this organization is extremely agile and moving fast, and you need to keep up. Second very important thing is sponsorship of those opportunities, because you know that certifications and courses and learning sometimes cost money, and not everybody is ready to invest in something job relevant. right? So if a company ready to co-sponsor or co-fund or just provide access to the specific resources to make sure that people are actually spending time on it, that is extremely important and beneficial. The third is, I just touched on this, is time. We can be so entrenched in our day-to-day activities, meetings, customer meetings, strategic conversations, document creation, content creation, and so on. So we just mentally think that we don't have time to learn. So the time allocation, something that we practice several times. Think about a learning or enablement day once a quarter, or enablement hour every week on Friday morning for everybody at the company, booked in the calendar with the relevant resources for today's session, similar to like you have in, if you have any of the fitness trackers, right, that in the evening saying, hey, you know what, it's time to unwind, go do your 5 minutes meditation to make sure that you're ready for a good night's sleep. Right, same with the constant reminder that hey, here are the resources that are relevant for your role. Next is relevancy, right? It should be applicable to your growth and evolution at the company. So if you have a competency model, right, or role model in the organization that shows that, hey, in order to be a leader in this role, here are the type of knowledge that you should have. Here are the type of skills and behaviors that you should demonstrate. In order to build those skills, here are the resources that we're providing you to make sure that you are capable of doing it. Go there, attend the classes, workshops, curriculums, and so on, and do it so you will be able to demonstrate us how you can do it. Another very important thing is leaders, right? In my mind, good leader is a leader that leads by example, showing the same behavior, demonstrating what she or he is learning every day, how they use their time, how they allocate it, how they learn, what are the things that they've done, what is the latest book they read, right? Like, and so on. I always have like 2 to 3 books on my desk that like I go back to when I'm reading, like additional part of the book, just this like small article from it or a small part, but I'm constantly progressing when I have additional 15 minutes. Right. And the last but not least, it's self discipline. You must be motivated as an individual, because if you are not motivated to learn, you will not be successful. Doesn't really matter what company is providing to you. And sometimes it's okay to stop for some of us, right? Some of us are growing to a certain level and say, hey, okay, this is where I want to thrive. I don't want to
Hmm.
grow up anymore. I want to grow wide. So what happened to me, because I was quite successful sales leader, but at some point I said, hey, instead of keep on earning, I want to give, right? I do have a lot of sales knowledge right now, and I want to spread it and give others and make them successful. And that's how I become leader. And that's where I'm getting my energy from. I really love making others successful. So
Hmm.
it's a little bit of a long answer, but I also want to finish with this. There is no silver bullet, right? You need to try and fail. And the different industries and different companies might have a different perspective on how to train them, because, right, like I would never say that a surgeon should only learn from e-learning curriculum allocating 1 hour a day to do it, right? Surgeons need a lot of practice and a safe practice in order to become a good surgeon, right? So there are deviations, but the behavioral transformation and ability to learn is always key to it, at least in my mind.
This is really interesting because it's not a one directional, solution to this. To your point, culture plays a big role. You as a leader, if I'm not tech-enabled myself, how could I ask my, team to go out there and use the material and make things accessible to your organization? From day one, you get this upfront agreement, you're joining, you're great. This is what's happening inside this organization. We're agile, we're moving fast. So learning is just part of the culture. So one thing I wanted to mention and get your thoughts on it. I was chatting with another enablement leader, and again, enterprise space, 20,000 sellers, and I want to be focused mostly on revenue for this last question. And he said something interesting. He said, for the type of organization we are running, what's top of mind today is whatever AI tool that we are bringing into the organization is embedded to my sellers' work. So it means although we have education, although we show by example, although we keep reinforcing what really matters for tomorrow. When they get hands on and see the value by doing rather than just theory, they can build this mindset. Not only mindset, it's embedded to their work. Like, to your point, you earlier said it, if there is a tool that update your CRM, that draft your emails or help you actually improve in your skill set, you naturally want more of that. So I think that could potentially help. But then my question is, how do we as leaders really take a step back and measure certain metrics to really assess whether an AI solution or a tool or a strategy is actually working with, whether it's a productivity, effectiveness? Can you tell us a little bit about these metrics that we need to track?
Yeah. Success measurement is always a challenge for probably any organization in the world. And you always should work backwards from the customer needs, and then it's easier to measure, right? Because if the customer need, in my case, internal customer, our like sales leaders, their need is to build a pipeline and drive the revenue, right? I can work backwards from it and make sure that the things that I'm doing are impacting these metrics.
Hmm.
How can you do it? One of the easiest ways is actually do a delta measurement, right? Before and after you did something. You should start with the leading indicators and thinking about, okay, what are the inputs are going into the process or in the tool or in the new program or in the new learning that actually made me do it. An example
Hmm.
could be, oh, hello. An example could be lack of revenue in artificial intelligence segment, right? Like we
Hmm.
are 50% behind the goal. What can we do about it? Working backwards from this goal, you can think about, okay, so in order to do it, we need a funnel, right, to be very wide and very big from the selling perspective. So we need to generate that initial line of the prospects and a bunch of customers. What can we do about it? Okay, we probably should make sure that everybody who we have contacting their customers and chatting with them whether or not AI is a need. Let's create a script for it. Let's teach everybody to how to pitch the initial AI pitch and have initial conversation. But let's make sure that they actually know it. So we need some kind of verification, whether it's accreditation, certification, exam, and so on. Make sure that everybody is completing it and doing it. So let's run the campaign based on that need, then wait for 3 months, depends on your sales cycle and the need that you have, and do that measurement again and see, like, from the moment when we started to this 3 months later, did we see the right trend in the pipeline generation or the deal closure on or win-loss results and so on? Depends on what you are measuring or not. Because if the answer is no, then we did something wrong. Let's scratch it. Let's do another try. But the delta measurement, whether it's confidence, competence, whether it's pipeline or revenue generation, number of phone calls, new customers, new contact, new activities in CRM, number of prospects, and so on, depends on your goal and your customer needs. But the delta measurement and the initial leading indicators and then the lagging indicators that truly matter for you afterwards is how you really measure success. And that's why, back to my point about short-term goals and the long-term goals, some of those are impossible to measure today, right? The easiest way of give you an example is to think about onboarding, right, from my world. When you are onboarding a new person, it takes anywhere between 6 and 18 months, depends on the company and the role, for that person to become productive. When you are changing onboarding program, taking into account all of the indicators and the measurement criteria that you're aware of, to a new program, when will you see the first result? 6 to 18 months from the moment when you changed it. The mistake that many leaders and organizations are making, they're making the change, and then 3 months from that point, they're like, but nothing has changed. Why did we invest it? Let's cut it and change it again. No, wait for the change to happen. Wait for the results to come through and make a data-driven decision. Measure twice, cut once instead of constantly doing the shifts and pivots, because then you are becoming uncertain on whether or not you're actually flying in the right direction. Yes, some pivots might be required, but give you the right amount of time. If it's just a prospecting campaign with a deal cycle of 1 month, yeah, you can easily pivot in 1 month or two. But if it's a longer process, give yourself time to process it and make sure that you're making the right decision.
I love it. So simple word, patience. when you
Sometimes,
ex
right? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Again, working backwards from the indicators that truly matter for that type of a program is extremely important. And I would also advise never to make a decision without data, never to embark on a huge project just because of a hinge, right? You need to do a market research. You need to be certain that you're doing the right thing, because any other way, you will not know how to measure success, right? Of your The only thing that I probably would advise people to do on the hinge is buy a lottery ticket, because there is no other data that will tell you whether or not you'll win.
True. That's an interesting example. So what I'm hearing is that, okay, whether you use AI or not, we're going back to your point earlier, it's just a tool. So you need to really go back to the problems you're trying to solve, whether externally or internally, and then do a benchmark. So in the past, this happens. Right now, this is happening. But some people, I think, have this fear of what if this fails us? Like, what if we actually get this started? How can we de-risk this to help them actually make that decision, even if it's in a smaller scale, instead of like company wide, let's go all crazy and just change everything right away? How can we really de-risk it for leaders to make decision to give a new thing a try?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge proponent of like failing fast mentality. I'd rather advise trying and failing and correcting instead of just waiting for too long. That's number one. Don't invest too much in it, right? Do a pilot, do A/B testing, compare it to your current environment or to different strategies, see which one is better, and go with that. Also, never invest in one thing, right? Majority of the companies that are successful on the market today are successful because they have a multitude of different directions how they could become successful, right? Like if you think about large giants like Google, right? Like Google doesn't have only ads. It has cloud, it invests in the self-driving cars, it has even like some healthcare projects, right? There was a VR bench and so on. There is this very well known concept of the J curves and S curves in the company innovation and development. So when you have something that is already flying at your company, right, and you see the trend that it's growing, more customers, more everything, you're getting the revenue, that's the time when you should start trying something else,
Hmm.
because then you will invest in something new and you will see that you're losing the money and you're investing in new people, but at some point it will start tipping up and giving you more money and they're giving you more resources and something that you want. The thing that you invented originally will keep on going up, 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 but at some point will start stagnating and start falling because it will become irrelevant. If you didn't think about the S curve, right, and you didn't think about the second thing, when you were making a lot of money, you are doomed, because you had one strategy that gave you to some degree a lot of opportunities and resources, but then became irrelevant because you didn't think about the innovation and the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. If you look at all of the successes on the market, right, going back to, for instance, Elon Musk, he didn't just wait for Tesla to become successful to kick off the new project, right? Whether it's Neuralink, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's something else, robotic technologies, right? Constantly trying new innovation, constantly trying new strategy. And not everything flies off always. Like if you think about Meta's challenges with the VR, right? When the pandemic hit and everybody thought that everything is going virtual and everything will be a success, like huge fashion brands started investing in the virtual things that you can buy there, accessories and so on. Bunch of NFTs popped up with the paintings, and people started buying virtual paintings for $20 billion. Where is it today, right? Whether it's mindset of people wasn't ready, technology wasn't ready, what was the risk of failure, we don't know. because there were a lot of things that were taken into consideration, and then pandemic was lifted and we started seeing the AI boom. But did they do wrong invest in it? We don't know, because it might be that period of time when they're
Mm.
invested and right now they're over here. But technology will evolve. Now they're producing new augmented reality glasses. Now they have a partnership with the Ray-Ban. The glasses are becoming lighter, cheaper, easier to deal with. The batteries are becoming smaller. Will we see the ramp again and the virtual reality to come back? I don't know. Maybe. But they will be the first to say, hey, we already have it. Right? So that's how I would think about it. Just multiple strategies. Failing fast is okay. If you, it's just mostly important to see that you're already failing. To say, okay, we stop doing it because we're failing. Let's do another thing. But again, do it based on data, not because you have a hinge.
I love it. It's to me, it's just having this startup mindset. Whether you're running a large org or you're a tiny startup, to keep trying new things, go back to your data, whether it works or not, and also watch what's happening in the market. Because to your point, we might be here, but when the market is growing, if you keep evolving, keep innovating, you're going to be in forefront of it anyways. Alex, thank you very much. I enjoyed this a lot.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to share your perspective and validate whether or not we are moving in the right direction, especially in the enablement. I'm trying to be always open minded and think about the new technologies that are evolving. Talk to experts like you who are living and breathing the moment, right, of AI as well, and validate whether or not something that I'm thinking about and it's always great to see that, like, how the technology evolves over time and who's taking the benefit of it. So I hope if somebody else benefits from our discussion, that would be fantastic. And I hope it will help leaders to think about how they can make their people more successful, how can they empower them, and how they can use the new tools to their benefit instead of being afraid of it.
Amazing. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And what I'm going to do is make sure that you guys have access to Alex's article. So if you want to read it, it's really fascinating. Go check it out. All right. Have a good day. Bye bye.